The morning air clung to the courthouse steps like a pause that hadn't yet found its breath. Overhead, the sky hung gray and undecided, the kind that whispered a storm might be coming, but not the kind you could see in the clouds. Inside the Fairland County Courthouse, time moved differently. Each hallway echoed with a heavy quiet, like the building held its breath between cases. Lawyers hustled past, heads down in briefings and burdens. Security officers watched with the kind of caution that had long blurred the line between safety and suspicion. No one noticed the man who entered through the east entrance. He didn't come with an entourage. He didn't wear a uniform, carry medals, or ask for special access. Just a charcoal gray button-down, crisp slacks, and a scuffed, leather briefcase that had traveled more than most of the people in that building ever would. His name was Leonard Briggs, age 62, retired. If you searched hard enough, you might find his name buried in the margins of military briefings, old war correspondence, or presidential orders with half the text still redacted. But today, he wasn't here as a general. He wasn't here to be saluted or recognized. He was here as a citizen, a witness, a man fulfilling a quiet promise he had made long ago to someone who had once looked to him for leadership. Leonard found an empty bench along the western corridor outside courtroom 3B. The oak wood creaked under his weight, faintly, politely, like it remembered him somehow. He placed the briefcase on his lap, opened it slowly, and began reviewing the documents inside. Deployment records, service commendations, a character affidavit, and a personal letter of testimony, handwritten on Department of Defense letterhead. He was there for Private Evan Moore. Moore had served under Leonard in Afghanistan, a sharp young soldier with courage in his chest and questions in his eyes. Now Moore was on trial for assaulting a police officer during a traffic stop. Some said it was resistance. Leonard had read the footage. He knew better. He hadn't been asked to show up. He didn't need to, but he did. Because when a system failed one of your own, silence wasn't neutrality, it was betrayal. A few feet away, the world spun on. Phones rang, shoes squeaked across the tile. No one paused to ask why a distinguished older man with precise posture sat alone, quiet and alert. They just assumed. And that was the beginning. He didn't want recognition. He wanted accountability. Not the performative kind, but the real messy human kind that required showing up, being present, and sometimes sitting on a hard bench until someone finally called your name. Leonard took out his phone and checked his inbox. A new message blinked back at him, confirmation from Moore's defense attorney that his name had been officially added to the witness list for case 3B17. He allowed himself a breath of quiet relief. He stood, adjusted the collar of his shirt, and made his way down the corridor toward the clerk's window labeled Legal Submissions. It was an unremarkable stretch of hallway with outdated signs, fading labels, and one barely legible metal plate embedded into the floor. He didn't see it at first, the one that read, Staff Only. It was a simple mistake, a small step into the wrong space. But in buildings where assumptions outpace facts, that's all it takes. From across the hallway, Officer Megan Doyle saw him. She was young, firm-jawed, clipped in her movement, and constantly looking for the next rule to enforce. And Leonard Briggs, standing where she thought he shouldn't be, didn't look like someone who belonged. She adjusted her stance, hand inching toward her utility belt. Leonard looked up. What he saw in her eyes wasn't protocol, it was a projection. And as he opened his mouth to explain, he had no idea that within minutes the weight of a nation's silence and its awakening would come crashing through the courtroom doors. But for now, he was just a man on a bench, and no one had yet decided to see him. Sir, I need you to stop right there. The voice came sharp, too sharp for the quiet of the hallway. It cut through the air like a blade, drawing the attention of no one and everyone at once. Leonard Briggs halted mid-step, his hand still resting on the brass counter that separated him from the clerk's submission window. He turned slowly, carefully, as if every movement had been calculated not to startle. Standing several feet away, Officer Megan Doyle had already squared her posture. Her uniform looked almost too crisp for the hour, pressed with the kind of precision that announced itself. Her hand rested just above the curve of her belt, near the radio, not quite at the holster. Not yet, but the message was clear. Leonard gave a small nod, polite. "I'm submitting documents for Case 3B17, he said calmly. "Witness documentation. I was told this is where they go." Megan didn't move. Her eyes narrowed slightly, analyzing. Not what he said, but how he looked. An older black man, no badge, no staff lanyard, no visible reason to be behind that worn metal plate on the floor that separated public space from staff access. And that was enough. "You crossed into a restricted area," she said firm. "Did you not see the sign?" "The signage isn't clear," Leonard replied, tone even. "But I wasn't trying to go anywhere I shouldn't, just following the clerk's instruction. Step away from the counter. Now." A pause stretched between them. Leonard stepped back. Megan moved in too quickly. Her steps were tight, efficient, and rehearsed. There was no threat, but her body moved like there was. She stopped a foot in front of him. "What's your name?" "Leonard Briggs." "Do you have identification?" He gestured to his briefcase. "Yes, inside. May I?" Her hand lifted an inch. "Keep your hands where I can see them." This time the silence was heavier. Leonard met her gaze. His voice stayed calm. "I'm a witness in an active case. The defense attorney confirmed my name this morning. I have sworn documents to submit." But Megan wasn't listening anymore. Or if she was, she'd already decided what he was, not who. He could see it in the way her jaw clenched, in the way her eyes skipped over the Department of Defense seal on the envelope peeking out of his briefcase. She didn't see that. She didn't want to. She saw a man she didn't recognize. A man who didn't match the mental picture of someone who belonged. And that was enough. "I need you to step away from the briefcase and place your hands behind your back." Leonard blinked once, slowly. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. "Officer," he said softly, "I've served this country for more than 3 decades. I understand protocol, but I assure you this is a mistake." "No mistake," she said flatly. "You're acting evasive. You entered a restricted area. You refused to follow commands. I complied with everything you asked." "I'm not going to debate with you," she snapped. A few heads turned now. A woman waiting by the courtroom doors tilted her phone screen up, just slightly. A man across the bench leaned forward, watching. Still no one spoke, because when authority dresses itself in a badge and bias, speaking up feels like rebellion. Leonard slowly raised his hands, palms forward. "I'm not resisting. I'm not escalating. But you're choosing to." And still, Megan stepped forward and reached for her cuffs. The sound they made, click, was louder than it had any right to be. He stood, cuffed, 20 feet from a courtroom where he had come to defend the truth. Not just for the young man on trial, but for something bigger, something older, something more fragile than most people understood. A few feet away, the clerk behind the glass window froze. Then quietly, she slid it shut. Nobody said a word, because they all saw it, but no one wanted to be the one to say it. Leonard Briggs had not been detained for what he did. He was being detained for what someone assumed he was. And every step that followed would remind them just how dangerous assumptions could be. The hallway had grown colder, or maybe it was just quieter. Either way, something shifted the moment the cuffs locked around Leonard's wrists. He didn't resist. He didn't lower his gaze. His spine stayed straight, his breath steady. The kind of calm that didn't come from pride, but from practice. Leonard had been here before, not in cuffs, no, but in moments like this, where dignity was challenged and silence became the only form of resistance left. Megan Doyle reached for her radio. "This is Officer Doyle, hallway 3. I've detained a male subject, non-compliant, possibly evasive, requesting immediate backup." The words echoed off the marble. No one asked why. No one intervened. Even the judge's assistant peered out from behind a cracked door and quickly vanished back inside. Leonard's voice came softly but firmly. "Officer, I'd like to make a phone call. I believe I'm entitled." She turned toward him, eyes narrowed. "To whom? Your lawyer, or should I call the White House while I'm at it?" Her voice carried mockery like a shield, daring anyone nearby to laugh along. A few chuckles rippled, nervous and uncertain. Leonard didn't flinch. He didn't smile. He only turned his head slightly. "No need," he said. "The Pentagon will do." It was not a boast. It was a statement of fact. The hallway fell silent again. For a long second, Megan said nothing. Then she gave a dismissive huff. "Right," she sneered. "The Pentagon." Leonard looked at her, not with anger, not with challenge, but with something quieter. Pity? Disappointment? It was hard to tell. "My phone's in the inner pocket of my coat," he said. "You're welcome to retrieve it. The contact is marked with a star. One number, that's all you need." Still playing the part of control, Megan reached into the coat and pulled out a sleek black phone. Government issued, matte finish, no apps, no case, no stickers, just function. She turned it over in her hand like she was expecting it to turn into a toy. "Let's see what kind of contacts you've got," she muttered. With a dramatic swipe, she opened the starred numbers and pressed the first listing. It rang once, then twice, then a voice answered. Clear, direct, no hesitation. "This is Major Kendall, Joint Operations Command." Megan froze. Leonard stayed silent, his eyes forward. The voice on the other end repeated, sharper this time. "This is Major Kendall. Who is this?" Leonard finally spoke. "This is General Leonard Briggs. I'm being unlawfully detained at the Fairland County Courthouse in Georgia. I need verification and a federal contact dispatched." There was no pause. "Are you secure, sir?" the voice asked. "For now." "Understood. Verification inbound. Holding the line. You're not alone, sir." A beep followed. Another voice came through, deeper, clipped. "This is Commander Reeves, Pentagon liaison, tracking your signal, confirming ID. Local authorities will be notified. Federal response within 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That was all it would take to rewrite the entire narrative Megan had built in her mind. But in that instant, she said nothing. Her fingers still held the phone, but her face had paled. A stiffness crawled across her jaw, her posture suddenly unsure. Her gaze darted toward Leonard, now seeing, truly seeing, for the first time that this man wasn't just anyone, and that he had never pretended to be someone important. He was someone important. The hallway was no longer watching Megan, it was watching him. Across the corridor, phones began to lift, slowly, cautiously. No one said it out loud, but they knew. Something had just broken, not because of shouting, not because of violence, but because one sentence said with absolute calm had dismantled the illusion of power built on ignorance. Leonard didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. His wrists were still in cuffs. His briefcase still sat unopened on the bench. But now the entire building felt like it was holding its breath. Because when truth finally speaks, not loud but clear, it doesn't ask permission. It demands to be heard. Outside, the faint hum of engines built slowly, low, steady, and unlike anything the courthouse had heard before. Inside, no one moved. The hallway felt suspended in time. Megan Doyle still held the phone in one hand, though her grip had weakened. Her mouth parted, but no words came. The voice on the other end of the call, Commander Reeves, remained clear, unyielding. "General Briggs," he said, "we are dispatching 3 federal units. Do not engage. Stand by for contact. A liaison from the Department of Defense is en route. Estimated arrival, 6 minutes. Leonard gave a single nod, even though the cuffs still pinned his wrists behind him. He didn't ask for anything. He simply stood, dignified, quiet, like a man who had nothing to prove but everything to stand for. And then it happened. The screech of tires on gravel outside the courthouse entrance. Not a panicked arrival, a calculated one. The kind that didn't stop for red lights. 3 black SUVs pulled up in tight formation. Their windows were tinted, dark enough to reflect your unease. One vehicle blocked the front steps. The second positioned itself near the side exit. The third, slower and deliberate, slid into a reserved parking spot labeled Judge Only. Doors opened in perfect synchrony. From the lead vehicle, 2 men stepped out in tailored black suits. No badges, no chatter, just silent efficiency. Behind them, a woman in full military uniform emerged from the second SUV, her posture like stone, the gleam of her colonel's bars catching the morning light. From the third vehicle came a man whose very presence changed the air. Full dress uniform, silver eagle pins, a row of ribbons across his chest that looked less like decoration and more like a chronicle of wars fought and won. He held a polished cover under one arm and moved with the kind of control only men trained in the quiet language of real authority could muster. He didn't run. He walked, slow, focused, absolute. And inside the courthouse, everything changed. Megan Doyle didn't say a word. She couldn't. Her radio crackled and died into static. Her breath quickened, not from fear, but from realization. The man in uniform entered, scanning the hallway with calm calculation. His eyes locked on Leonard Briggs. "General," he said, voice low but unmistakably clear, "we received your transmission. You're in contact with Joint Command. DHS has been informed. You are secure." Leonard gave a quiet nod. The man turned to Megan Doyle next. "Are you the officer who detained him?" She stiffened, her voice clipped. "Yes, sir. He was in a restricted zone. He failed to—" He raised a hand. The interruption was not aggressive, but it was final. "That man," the officer said, "holds top-level clearance with the Department of Defense. You placed him in restraints without verifying his ID. You escalated without cause. You broadcast the detention of a federal military official over an unsecured channel." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Each word fell like a stone in a chapel. "Effective immediately," he continued, "you are relieved of supervisory authority within this building. Step back." And just like that, yam, the badge that had felt like power a moment ago now weighed like a mistake. Megan stepped back, face drained of blood, hands trembling slightly. She didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. Leonard was still in cuffs, but everyone watching knew the power in the hallway had shifted. The man in uniform turned to a nearby officer and gave a curt nod. The cuffs were removed. The metal clicked, softer this time, but it might as well have been thunder. Leonard flexed his hands gently, letting the circulation return. He straightened his collar. Still composed, still quiet, he didn't speak. Not yet. But across the courthouse, judges, clerks, lawyers, and bystanders alike, something collective and unsettling began to settle in. They had not witnessed a man being detained. They had witnessed a system revealing its assumptions. And now it stood corrected, not by a lawsuit, not by shouting, but by the arrival of truth wearing medals. The courtroom doors had opened, but the usual murmur of voices never followed. Instead, a heavy silence carried through the space, the kind that didn't feel empty, but full of breath held, full of reckoning. Leonard Briggs stood in the center of it all, hands no longer cuffed, jacket now straightened, spine still tall. He didn't move forward. He didn't demand an explanation. He simply turned and looked at the officer who had restrained him, Officer Megan Doyle. Her voice was barely audible when it came. "You're a general." Leonard didn't raise his voice. "I told you," he said gently. All you had to do was check the folder in my case. She didn't answer. Across the room, the presiding judge rose slowly from his seat, brows furrowed in confusion. He looked toward the uniformed colonel now standing near the bench, then back at Leonard. "Officer, what's going on here?" the judge asked, the command in his voice dulled by uncertainty. The colonel stepped forward. He held out a folder, precise, authoritative. "Your Honor," he said, "this is formal documentation from the Department of Defense. It includes clearance verification, liaison confirmation, and a federal complaint pending." The judge opened the folder. His eyes scanned the papers, then looked back up, something in his expression crumbling. "You're Leonard Briggs," he said, "Lieutenant General, Joint Operations, Southeast Command." Leonard gave the faintest nod. "And today," the colonel added calmly, "this court treated him like a suspect while he was performing a civic duty, without question, without pause." The weight of the moment pressed into the walls. The judge opened his mouth, perhaps to justify, perhaps to apologize. But Leonard stepped forward first. He didn't gesture. He didn't command the room. He just stood and began to speak. "She didn't detain me for what I did," he said, voice steady, words clear. "She detained me for what she assumed I was." Not a murmur stirred. "I didn't need her to see a general," he continued. "I didn't demand a salute or special treatment. I didn't want to be recognized. I just needed her to see a man." From the front row, a law student, Sophia Lynn, sat frozen, her phone already recording. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the feeling that this moment might matter far beyond these four walls. Leonard let the silence breathe before speaking again. "I've led operations across continents. I've briefed presidents. I've bled beside men in combat who looked nothing like me, but wore the same flag on their shoulder." He paused, his voice softened, but the room leaned in closer. "And none of it matters. If the moment I take off the uniform, I become something to fear again." Eyes dropped, shoulders slumped. It wasn't guilt, not yet. It was recognition. "You didn't see a threat," he said, glancing toward Megan, not to shame but to show her the truth. "You saw a type and you acted on it." She didn't speak. She didn't move. Leonard turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'm still willing to testify in case 3B17. The young man on trial deserves better than what I received. I didn't come here to make a point. I came here because I still believe in what this room is supposed to represent." He stepped back, hands folded, as if the courtroom itself needed a moment to catch up. And it did, because for once, it wasn't the uniform that commanded respect. It was the man who had never needed one. The lesson: this wasn't a story about rank. It was a story about recognition, about how quick we are to judge, how slow we are to see, about how systems built to uphold justice can fail the very people who have defended it, about how dignity doesn't come from medals or titles or force, but from how a person chooses to stand when the world tries to fold them down. Leonard Briggs reminded a courtroom and later a nation that power doesn't always arrive shouting. Sometimes it arrives in silence. And sometimes the most commanding voice in the room is the one that never needed to raise itself.